Welcome to the latest episode of Harrington Starr's Fintech Focus TV. I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Collings, the Chairman and Chief Executive of Torstone Technologies, who were one of the most influential fintech firms of 2019, as judged by an expert panel of judges. Thanks very much for being here, Brian.
No, thank you for the invite. It's excellent.
No problem. So Torstone, obviously fantastic company. I think you guys have been doing some really good stuff recently, and I think you and I first met about 3 or 4 years ago when we were kind of doing a first batch of hiring. You guys started up about 8 years ago. It was obviously a fairly difficult time in the market back then, and
Indeed.
pretty challenging starting up a company. How did you find it back then?
No, and actually one of the reasons that we sort of formed the company was partly because of the sort of environment at that time. But I guess we had a couple of really sort of interesting positives. We'd actually built the product in an investment banking environment. So from that perspective, coming out as a fintech, one of the hardest things of fintech is actually building the product to begin with. So we're very lucky from that point of view. We also had 3 clients from day one, so profitable from day one. So quite a unique, a unique positioning from that point of view. But still a lot of challenges in terms of growth. Having some clients that were referenceable, I think is so important when you're sort of starting up. That first 1 or 2 clients is crucial, and we had that on board, which I think really helped the sort of growth of the company. Fantastic.
I can imagine you would have had a kind of culture already set with you guys all having known each other from the investment banking world.
Very much so, and I think that's really important in terms of our success over that time, is that culture. So the investment banking world, we sort of understood because we were working internally. We have the day-to-day type of pressure, the sort of change the bank and run the bank at the same time, all of those sort of pressures are sort of happening. We continue with that sort of DevOps philosophy. And culturally, very strong in terms of coming in out of a banking environment. You're very used to the audit process, very used to sort of the, I guess, the things necessary to go and sell your product into another company.
Yeah, and it's interesting you touch on growth there, because obviously I think over the last 18 months has probably been the fastest growing period for your company. You've recently doubled the European headquarters.
Absolutely.
How have you found that?
No, very, I guess the balance, so we grew in revenue terms over 50% year on year, and that definitely put pressures on physical environments in the UK, although we've got offices around the globe. But in terms of that growth, it's really the balance of hiring the right people to begin with, and thanks for your help all that time. But hiring the right people, but also balancing how many people you can get on board with the pipeline and the sales. And I think fintechs particularly find that hard, because you've got to get that balance very correct. One hand, you've got lots of people on the bench with nothing to do. Obviously, can continue to increase your product, and we do a lot of product development, but you also need the revenue to continue the growth, and I think that balance is really critical.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because there's definitely, I suppose, stories of firms whereby they've done it in the wrong way. So they brought too many people on, haven't really kind of had the pipeline to sustain that, and you kind of see a little bit of a roller coaster effect where they go up and come back down again. I think you guys, it seems like, have really focused on making sure you do it in the right way, so maybe not growing quite as fast, but much more sustainably.
No, and absolutely, and we've had other people may get investment in to sort of spur that, so we've been very lucky not to need that investment. And I think we do it in a couple of ways. One, we're always looking at the next team, because it's sales cycles are long, but also actually getting new people onboarded, understanding the technology and building that up is also fairly long, and the two are probably equal, but that still means you've got to balance that. Part of the other techniques that we've been looking at is also partnering with third parties. So there are some parts of an implementation that are relatively generic. You can get a project manager, you can get sort of domain expertise, and they don't need to know about our product, but clearly our expertise comes with the product and our business knowledge as well. So having a little bit of both in terms of solid hiring for our core business, but also sort of helping out with some temporary or contract side of the business as well.
Fantastic. Is there anything you'd particularly attribute your success to?
I think our clients, foremost. I guess we have a great reputation in the market, and we're very proud of that, but also very conscious to keep that going. So we have very good interaction with our clients in terms of the responsiveness and the agile approach of what we do. The second is our people, because clearly our people are really responsible for the fact that the clients are very happy with what they've got, both from rapid implementation where you're finding your ground with a new client and getting to know each other, and your people are at the front line there. So extremely important, which means the culture and the quality of the people we bring on board is super important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned that culture side of things. It was one thing having a very set culture from 20 people who all know each other and have known each other for a few years. Very different when you've got constantly new people coming in and new personalities and that type of thing. How have you found maintaining that culture and making it a good place to work?
Yeah, and I think so we're a very dynamic, creative company. So I think that's the sort of foremost thing. We have very talented people that certainly in the past have been juggling multiple roles. So the amount of responsibility we give individuals is very high. So a couple of things with that growth. Obviously, we've had people running systems and running marketing at the same time, and as we've grown, we've specialized. So we then brought in skill sets that we need, but also individual specialists that sort of help from that point of view. But we've also kept the fact that individuals can grow in different directions. So I always use a sort of a three-dimensional orthogonal matrix, not to get too technical, but people can grow and become senior along the technical route, pure technical route. People can do the same on the business, in this case finance, and people can go the traditional route also on the management side. But you don't need to go up the management ladder to be seen as sort of senior and obviously be compensated in that sort of way as well. So we want to keep all of those three tracks going concurrently.
I think that's really important, because I think one of the things that we get when we speak to candidates for the reasons why they want to move on from somewhere is because, as you say, they're kind of getting shoehorned into one particular way, like especially in banks, it's management is really the only way up. Otherwise, you just kind of stay where you are. But it sounds like you guys kind of come up with quite a innovative way of getting around that.
No, definitely, and I think we're because we're bigger now anyway. Not too big, but just right, as I always say. But we've got enough roles that also people can change. So we've actually had quite a few people move offices. For example, we hired a support lady in London. She was with us for about 3 years. Had a interest to go to Hong Kong. So, perfect. She'd sort of built up skills there. She's now in Hong Kong for at least a couple of years. She also knows Japanese, so you never know. She might end up in Tokyo in the near future.
That's fantastic. And I think having that opportunity for the people in your company is so important. And as I said, especially when you're looking to grow at the rate you guys have been growing.
Absolutely.
Obviously, growth also comes through other means. And hot off the presses yesterday, you announced you'd acquired Percentile. What's kind of the thought process behind that deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So just take a little step back in terms of Torstone. So Torstone is very much post-trade. And for me, I look at the sort of functional level. So, we cover the middle office, we cover back office, we cover accounting. So we are trying to be that sort of bank or broker in a box from a post-trade perspective. And I think one of the interesting layers or functional sort of horizontal layers there was the risk management side. So Percentile, very focused at real-time risk management. They also fit so neatly in terms of culture. They're cloud-based, so a sort of SaaS solution, the same as we are. So really fit, and that's sort of complete. So historically, we, and obviously still do, but focus at the CFOs from the accounting side. We focus the sort of head of ops, head of compliance, or sort of head of middle office, which all come in under the COO. We're now looking at the chief risk officer, and how can we help him? So not focused at the front office at all. It's all post-trade, but we're now really capturing everything in that sort of post-trade arena. So one of the I guess strategic focuses for us, looking at our clients, is how can we help them in total cost of ownership, because that's the challenges are still very much on the sort of cost side at the moment. we try to do that in 3 ways, and it's all about consolidation. So if somebody can consolidate across their asset class, so if they're doing multiple asset classes but have different operational processes for those, how do they bring those together? And that can improve costs. The second is geographically. So we are global, and we've got clients that are users in more than one location, and hopefully eventually globally, but that's the sort of trend that we're seeing. And finally, I think where Percentile comes in is that functional layer. If we can, in a single integrated system, using common data, that's all reconciled with each other, if we can put all of those functions, in that single platform and deliver that to the client, I think that makes tremendous sense for them.
Fantastic. So it's almost like rounding out your offering and kind of completing everything
Yep.
you would offer from a post-trader perspective.
No, completely. And challenges that are coming along, such as regulation, that helps us to, on the I guess settlement side, we see CSDR coming along, so we're tackling that for our clients. On the risk side, we see the FRTB regulation coming along, so that sort of helps on the I guess regulatory capital side as well. So I think we're trying to sort of hit all of those complexities in the market at the moment.
Fantastic. I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that you said there, one of them being obviously challenges globally.
Yes.
And with this year in particular, but especially over the last probably 18 to 24 months, it's been a tricky situation, certainly politically, for companies who are maybe dealing with European clients, and I know that Torstone deal fairly heavily in Europe.
Yes.
What would you kind of say are some of the key challenges facing some of the fintech firms at the moment going forward?
And I hate to use the word Brexit, because I'm sure, I'm sure you were alluding to that partly.
Almost got through the whole interview.
Indeed. But I think actually for us that has, there may have been a few decisions that have been delayed, but actually in practical terms that hasn't really affected us, which is in a way a surprise, but we looked into sort of how that would. So if anything, people are having to change because of that, and we're a very agile sort of platform. So being able to help people by setting up new entities, physical locations, we're very, as a software as a service, we can be deployed pretty much anywhere. So from that point of view, I think it's created opportunities for us. Generally, on a global basis, you're right. Politically, this I won't mention any other ones, but politically, lots of change. I think that trend of change is something that people have to just embrace. I think, not to hark back too much to other regulatory changes, but MiFID II, I think we saw a lot of organisations go through a lot of pain, partly because restricted legacy systems, and that was quite a costly change to them. And I think we certainly saw an uptick straight after MiFID II had gone live, where people were making more medium, long-term decisions. We have to get on to something different, something that can, as I mentioned before, run the bank, change the bank can be the same thing, and their processes can be very agile as well. So they can adapt to new regulatory changes, adapt to business changes as well, given that sort of environment.
Do you think the opportunity still exists for disruptors to come into the market? I mean, you can lose count of how many of they've been over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Some have been real disruptors, others have kind of fizzled out. Do you think opportunity still exists?
I think disruption always comes from the side. So I think the things that people are talking about now, and if we get into sort of DLT and blockchain, I think that's a long burn. I think that's not going to be an immediate, maybe 5 years there'll be more of it. For us, our strategy is actually to embrace it in terms of not embracing the technology particularly, but embracing the fact there will be other venues. They will use blockchain as their mechanism, but we'll still need to connect to them just as we do with any other depository or any other exchange. So I think as from our strategy, there is going to be a decade or more of the processes being pretty similar, despite different asset classes like the cryptocurrency asset class, which I think will sort of take off in the same regulatory environment. I think also because some of it that is outside at the moment, but I see that moving back in, and efficiencies will come from that, and I think that's great. But I think the processes that we operationally that banks and brokers are dealing with will move towards that. And the disruption almost comes from some of the very basics, going onto the cloud, which is more dynamic, both from the point of view of expanding expanding your CPU capacity, your data capacity very rapidly if you need it, as needed. Some of our clients certainly need it on the day of the referendum, or maybe the result of the referendum.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I think that capacity expansion is really useful, and that sort of rapid change I think is sort of key.
So moving forward, what do you think Torstone will need to focus on to maintain your success?
No, absolutely. Well, I think as you've seen, we're expanding certainly on a global basis in terms of going into different locations. We've recently moved into the Nordics, for example, putting a lot of effort into Canada. We're already in the US. And a couple of years ago, we went into Tokyo. So geographically, to keep the success going, we're expanding from that perspective. As you mentioned, Percentile brings us a sort of another function. So I think expanding that out, not just to our own client base, but I think that brings other opportunities in terms of potential sort of client focus. Final thing is we are, from a strategy point of view, looking from an expanding product. So we're extensive in the securities world and the OTC derivatives world. We're now looking at the ETD world, so exchange-traded derivatives, and that helps us focus on some of the futures and options brokers as well. So that's another sort of avenue of expansion, which clearly the cross-asset risk side of what we've done with Percentile is also there. So that's more in terms of our strategy. I think from a technology perspective, we obviously got quite a lot of highly structured data, the banks, trades and books and records. We're now putting that into a big data environment, specifically Amazon's Athena, and then that allows us to sort of put in some unstructured data. Now, in particular, I think that future-proofs any of our clients for sophisticated AI techniques going forward. So I think there's a huge amount of change that can go on with basically getting onto the cloud and having some standard automation, but at least that future-proofs, going forward. When I think some of these AI techniques are going to be quite astounding, both from the point of view of operational efficiency, but also we're seeing more and more of the data analytics that it can provide from a business perspective to the front office. Who's doing what business with whom and how efficient that business is. So I think that's quite exciting, both the big data and AI going forward. The final thing I think is just, from our point of view, that growth of getting the right people on board. So thank you for your help so far.
No, thank you. We look forward to continuing to working with you. Brian, thank you very much for coming in. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
You can read more about Torstone in the Financial Technologist. It's available either in hard copy if you get in touch, or you can download it from the website. And yeah, look forward to hearing much more about your success in the future.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.